The art of writing a story comes in numerous stages and drafts, including the pitch, the logline, the synopsis, and then the script. But in any of those stages, those stories are constantly rewritten and refined to potentially make a truly fascinating end product. And the legendary tale of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is no different. And so today on Cut Content, we explored the original beta story of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell too to further support us and keep creating new videos. Now, the beta story of Zelda 64 was luckily for us released to the public in 1997 via the Nintendo website and an issue of Nintendo Power. We'll go through each beat of the story and compare the differences here with the final games as well as an analysis of those beta elements. So sit back and relax, for we are about to explore a familiar but unused tale. Link is preparing for his coming-of-age ceremony, in which he will receive a guardian spirit. In the tradition of this people, children receive a fairy from the fairy tree when they reach adulthood. This fairy becomes a person's lifelong familiar. The fairy accompanies the youthful adventurer seeking his or her fortune in the maze-like forest or in the lands beyond. So already, a few things are very different. First off, based on that screenshot accompanying the story on the Nintendo website, it being 1997 as well, it appears to be from the third stage of development, which had a HUD that was similar to the final games but in a different style. During this stage, only adult Link was around and no child Link, and this fits very well here as this was supposed to be a coming-of-age story, where Link, who is just turning into an adult, is supposed to receive a fairy as a gift from the fairy tree, the original name of the Great Deku Tree, as explained here, as opposed to Link just being a child without a fairy and was just given one for a task. But the other thing here is a reference to Link's people. In Ocarina of Time's released game, Link's people at the start of the game are the Kokiri people, who are all these childlike beings who never grow up. But in this stage, these people would all be capable of growing up. The only thing it doesn't tell us is if these people were Hylians just living near the forest with this tradition or a whole separate people. Moving onwards, Link's ceremony, however, is not destined to be a happy one. The fairy tree, source of the guardian spirits, is captured by a strange creature from the depths of the forest. Link is able to locate his guardian spirit, Navi, and with her help, slay the creature. However, in the process, the fairy tree is grievously damaged. As its life force ebbs, the fairy tree speaks the words that will shape Link's destiny. Do not allow the thief Ganondorf to capture the Triforce. The tree mystically communicates, "Oh brave one, you must take this sacred stone to a wise man." This part is actually largely the same as the final games, down to a creature quote-unquote capturing the Great Deku Tree and proceeding to kill him. But still, some minor and major differences exist here. By this description, it seems Link has to actually search and find Navi in order to go on and try to save the Great Deku Tree, as opposed to the final game where Navi searches for Link off the bat. The other major piece of difference is how the Great Deku Tree says to take the sacred stone to a wise man. Who was this wise man? Because in the final game, he was told to just go and see Princess Zelda. Could it be that, like in Link to the Past, a sage lives off in a remote location that Link was to visit with the stone? By that logic, it is possible that the sage Rauru could have been a contender of someone you were to visit early in the game. But what would he have done with the sacred stone? We'll get to that shortly. Continuing on, Ganondorf was infamous throughout the land for his evil practices as the King of Thieves. He lusted for the power of the Triforce and searched throughout Hyrule for its resting place, most recently plunging into the forest of Link's people. Link knew he was in danger should Ganondorf find him. He took the sacred stone from the fairy tree and set out for Hyrule Castle, the capital of the Hyrulean people. Again, pretty largely the same here, everything from Ganondorf's pursuit of the Triforce to taking the sacred stone to Hyrule Castle. However, there is one contradictory flaw we are seeing here, and it's that Link is to go straight to Hyrule Castle. Earlier, the Deku Tree told him to visit an old man, and I was theorizing maybe the wise man was stationed off somewhere, but here he instead goes to Hyrule Castle. So I have two theories here, in that either Link visits the old man, is told to visit Princess Zelda as such, or the old man resides within Hyrule Castle itself, and he needs to visit him as such. Continuing on, upon entering the castle, Link is welcomed by the young Princess Zelda, a woman of the Hyrulean royal family, about the same age as he. She is well aware of the crisis facing the land of Hyrule. Zelda relates further details about the Triforce's hiding place, telling Link that he needs to find the 3 sacred stones that fit into the magical Ocarina, which serves as the key to the hidden realm. Link races with the evil Ganondorf to find the sacred stones, and the hiding place of the Triforce is on. To no surprise here, Zelda would of course be an adult here like Link, as they are supposed to be the same age here too. But going back to that wise man, he isn't mentioned anywhere, and Zelda supposedly already knew everything that was going on, much like the released games version. At this stage, it's either Link visiting the wise man before hitting up Hyrule Castle as I mentioned earlier, or the wise man is nowhere to be seen when entering Hyrule Castle, and instead Zelda appears and greets Link with his task. Now the other interesting bit is how the sacred stones are to be fitted into the magical Ocarina. It's not called the Ocarina of Time yet, possibly because the time travel mechanic wasn't implemented, and so the Ocarina instead had a different magical property. We do see in many beta screenshots of the sacred stones being fitted into the Ocarina too. In fact, this only clarifies it. I imagine they would be fitted in, and with a song would open the door to the Master Sword and the Hidden Realm, as it was called in that version of the story. And wrapping up the story, Zelda 64 tells the story of an earlier age of Hyrule, when Ganon was merely known as the King of Thieves, and not the powerful creature of evil he becomes in the other Legend of Zelda adventures. Which, since the last console game was A Link to the Past, this is no surprise why they mentioned that this Ganondorf will be different, and also that this game will be a prequel. But this is as far as the story goes, so what does that mean? Well, either they wanted to only share a piece of the story, or they really didn't have much more done than this. And I can believe the latter part a bit more. As I have stated, the third stage of development didn't have Child Link implemented yet. And that wouldn't be until the 4th stage actually, where they would have him implemented along with the time travel mechanic. But why did they do that even? A theory I have is that they may have not known what to do after the sacred stones were collected. Story beats are in many ways similar to the final games too, but with some major differences still, so it can be presumed that like in the original game, Ganon would take over the Hyrule Castle and the nation of Hyrule as well. But in this case, how would that even be presented without a time skip? Ganondorf taking over and just sitting there with maybe a large barrier around doing nothing while the rest of Hyrule is living their merry lives? Oh wait, that was the plot of Twilight Princess! I did mention on multiple occasions that Twilight Princess does take a lot of inspiration from the beta stages of Ocarina of Time, as previously confirmed in an interview by Miyamoto and Onuma. But say if this story was actually the story that they were gonna go with, Hyrule would never be destroyed. At most, you would maybe see Ganondorf's forces taking siege of areas and taking them over, but never actually see Hyrule in smoke like the original game presented. Link theoretically could still visit the temples to awaken the 7 stages and finish Ganondorf, and it'd be a complete story still. But when you look at all that, it's kind of a step backwards from A Link to the Past actually. A Link to the Past sent you in a completely different world known as the Dark Realm after collecting the 3 key items, so you wouldn't just be accessing the dungeons that were there the whole time, but rather in a different place that showed off in full force what Ganondorf's heart created when he touched the Triforce. This may in fact be the very reason they decide to backpedal and again show the evil of Ganondorf in the form of a time skip by turning Link into a child at the start of the game and making his people permanent children alongside him. I imagine not doing this would keep it from outpacing A Link to the Past, which may have been something they indeed wanted to surpass at the time in every ways possible. Alternatively, it is possible that they wanted to create another Dark World again, but it might have ended up being a little too similar to A Link to the Past then, and therefore we got another world in the form of a time skip, which of course ended up becoming its own world when the timeline split anyways, but we're not opening that can of worms today. Now I mentioned that this was the story during Stage 3, and that's the thing. It was the third stage, meaning during Stage 1 and 2, it might have had a vastly different story. We know the Great Deku Tree was still around back then too, based on footage and images for one, and the only town we ever saw was the Hyrule Market Town, which may have in fact even been the original place Link's people lived in. In fact, I have previously theorized that the Beta Lost Woods from those early stages likely connected to the Great Deku Tree as well. Well, if you do actually take the screenshot of the Lost Woods, drastically increase the blacks, you see these castle walls. And I theorize it could have even been the beta structure found in the Giga Leak, which likely contains Hyrule Castle and even Castletown considering its large size, like the original screenshot, and the castle spire that you see in town. Meaning, maybe Link started in this town, went through the Lost Woods to the Great Deku Tree to get his fairy back then. In fact, maybe the castle walls were all along a big hub zone at one point, much like the way Clock Town was in Majora's Mask, and this might have been the first dungeon it led you to. Especially it being originally planned on the 64DD, the expanded power would in fact load whole areas this big, and the story may have progressed with Hyrule Market Town as its hub zone. But while this is an idea of what the story of Stage 1 and 2 could have been, nothing was ever released by Nintendo at that time to tell us. In fact, the story may have not even existed, and they were just simply building a world first before making a story, as it was a very experimental 2 stages. But even with the story we got for Stage 3, it's fascinating what changed and what they could have been planning for the later half of the game. But in the end, the story we got at the time was a truly historic and cinematic tale that really made it stand out in combination with its gameplay and visuals. But Zelda's beta isn't just limited to its story, and there's a ton more that I plan to cover, so hit the subscribe button, for I plan to be back with more Zelda and other games cut content too. Hit the like button too, and leave a comment below on if you would have preferred the beta story over the final games. So everyone, thank you for watching!